My name is Patrick Gadara. So I'm working, I work with the New Humanitarian. On this call, I'm here representing the Authentic Storytelling Review panel. And I just wanted to speak a little bit about what we are doing with the submissions that we have received from new people regarding the Authentic Storytelling Pledge. So just to introduce the members of the panel, they're not all here, but a few I've seen on this call are there. So Olivia Alaso, Natalie Latier, Fabeha Moni, Gino Riadi, and Tara Todras Whitehill. So those are the 6 members, and myself are the 6 members. Natalie and I are the co-chairs of that panel. Now, as part of our work, we've developed a rubric to help us with the assessment and to try and make the assessments be more uniform, a rubric and a template for utilizing the rubric. The rubric essentially is based on the undertakings that are there under the Authentic Storytelling Pledge, as well as a framework that was developed by Natalie and Dr. Laura Hernandez. It includes 6 areas. So one is inclusion and representation, under which we assess the diversity in represented groups in the information, whether any ethnicities, characteristics are ignored or misrepresented within the communication. And also we think about who's the intended audience. You will appreciate that in the world today, it's becoming much harder to have a communication that simply goes to one set of audience. And we've got to think about the diversity of that audience when you're putting out your communication. So that's something we'll be thinking about. Second area is white saviorism and homogenization, under which we look at how the NGOs or INGOs portray their own role in addressing problems. Is it from the perspective of we are coming in to save the natives, or is it are they contextualizing what their efforts are within the context of the agency of local people, not just local organizations, but also local communities? What are people doing for themselves? Is that explained in their communications? Do they explain the scale of what they can do to help? A lot of times you will see in communications is these suggestions almost that we will solve the problem, and in many cases you actually cannot. So do you explain the scale of what you're able to do and what you really cannot do, and what other participants, other players in this, whether it's governments, local agencies, local communities, what they are doing as well. The third pillar on this is white gaze and Eurocentric position, where we ask whose voice is telling the story, from what perspective, and also what is the end goal that is being presented here. Is the idea of this that we're trying to build communities to become sort of small or lesser reflections of the West, where it's portrayed like the West is the epitome of development, and that is the only way of being? Does it allow for other ways of being by other communities? We are not just trying to quote unquote develop them. Are there different ideas regarding things like poverty? What does it mean to be poor in their context? Do these societies think of themselves as poor or wealthy? And how does the communication then frame this? Fourth one would be colonially avoidant, where does it actually address the legacy of colonialism when trying to present the problems? Are they sort of presented as appearing from the other, or the fault of the people who are suffering there, or do we look at the historical antecedents that lead to this? Part of that is also thinking about how we attribute blame. Some of the communications that I've seen, for example, with regard to Gaza, there is quite a reluctance to say who is causing the problem there. Who is this? Who is blockading the strip? Who is stopping humanitarian aid coming across? And so, question is again, are these the sorts of communications practices we want to maintain? The sixth and final pillar we're looking at is with imagery and language. What sort of images are used? Are they exploitative imagery? What sort of language is employed in terms of describing both the the communities that we're working with, or you're partnering with, or the people you're assisting? And also in terms of giving credit, whether it's when you're using photographers, or you're using locals to help you gather information, materials, etc. To what extent are they actually credited in this? Yeah, so that's basically what the rubric will cover. As I said, there's a supporting assessment template that will allow for this to be presented in a uniform way across all NGOs. We're looking, the timelines we're working with, basically we should be done with the first set of assessments, I think by this month, and we're looking maybe December, January, to doing the second set, and then we should be completed with that, which then will be fed up to the Global Advisory Group, as well as individual reports given to the individual NGOs, so that they can actually get feedback specific to them and to the materials that they have provided to the group. I'll just say one or two things about some of the things that we have noticed so far. Obviously, we haven't yet collated everything. So what I'm saying is just really just off the top. Some of the things that I have personally noticed and that have been raised by some of my colleagues have been noticed. First, I think, is just how the communications is presented. So who is doing the speaking? And in some of it, you see there's an actual intention and effort put in to have the local voice speak to, local realities. But sometimes there is a tendency and a temptation, I guess, to overlay it with a more, I guess, westernized voice or framing, so that it comes across as not necessarily being authentic, as being not somebody speaking about their experience, but trying to achieve something through this. So it's something that I think somebody should people should watch out for and keep in mind. And the second is to really think about the context within which some of this communications is put out. Obviously, there is a history to how crises and humanitarian hotspots basically have been portrayed. And you have to be aware of that. So if you take a particular image, maybe of a white person giving a black person aid to a black person, etc., you have to think how that will be then understood within the context of how communications has been done before. So it might not be your intention to do this, but a lot of times once it goes, this thing has gone out, you're not going to get opportunities to start explaining what you wanted to do. So it's really important to be aware of the context within which you're giving out this information. One final thing is I've seen cases where people explain that, yes, we are trying not to use certain language, but still in the framing of what they say, even within the very piece that they were trying to explain the language they're getting away from, you see a repetition of sort of these themes of whether it's saviorism, whether it is of portraying communities as not necessarily being able to take care of themselves, of requiring um, uh, 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 this sort of help in order to discover their voice, and things like that. So again, it's really important to just be aware of how this will come across, that, and just simply saying, I'm trying to get away from this isn't useful, isn't helpful if you're not actually doing it. I think I'm probably out of time, so I'll stop there, and I'll take questions after the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick Digatara, not the other two. Again, we'll still hold our thoughts as we keep our questions. We are taking note of them. We'll take them after the next session. So we'll have Mary Rose. Mary Rose, come to the mic.